Good evening, Internet. I hope you've had a wonderful day. It's been beautiful weather here again. I got out and mowed the lawn, went for a bike ride, a little run down to Weatherford for supplies. And what else? I worked outside at the where our old swimming pool used to be. We're going to turn that into a garden area. Do some raised bed gardening. Been working on trying to take down the old deck, and we're going to have to. There's a lot of stuff under where the pool used to be, and it's going to take a little bit of work, but a little bit at a time, and we'll get her done. This video should be, I'm planning on April 1st, so April Fool's Day. For those of you who do the April Fools, 26 years ago, my sister called me on April 1st and in the morning, and to tell me that my dad had passed away. So I haven't really been too thrilled about April Fool's jokes ever since. So anyway, enough about me and my problems. Let's move on to the book, because that's why you're here. I know. Not about Wayne Grandpa. How the King Changed His Mind. Chapter 21. Can you see? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Just then a rabbit band of nearly 50 pieces marched in, playing upon golden instruments and dressed in neat uniforms. Following the band came the nobility of Bunnybury, all richly dressed and hopping along on their rear legs. Oh, somebody sent me a message. Both the ladies and the gentlemen wore white gloves upon their paws, with their rings on the outside of the gloves, as this seemed to be the fashion here. Some of the lady rabbits carried lorgnettes, while many of the gentlemen rabbits wore monocles in their left eyes. The courtiers and their ladies paraded past the king, who introduced Princess Dorothy to each couple in a very graceful manner. Then the company seated themselves in chairs and on sofas and looked expectantly at their monarch. "It is our royal duty, as well as our royal pleasure," he said, "to provide fitting entertainment for our distinguished guest. We will now present the royal band of whiskered friskers." As he spoke, the musicians, who had arranged themselves in a corner, struck up a dance melody, while into the room pranced the whiskered friskers. They were 8 pretty rabbits, dressed only in gauzy purple skirts fastened around their waist with diamond bands. Their whiskers were colored in rich purple, but otherwise they were pure white. After bowing before the king and Dorothy, the friskers began their pranks, and these were so comical that Dorothy laughed with real enjoyment. They not only danced together, whirling and gyrating around the room, but they leaped over one another and stood upon their heads and hopped and skipped here, and they're so nimbly that it was hard work to keep track of them. Finally, they all made double somersaults and turned handsprings out of the room. The nobility enthusiastically applauded. and Dorothy applauded with them. "They're fine," she said to the king. "Yes, the whiskered friskers are really very clever," he replied. "I shall hate to part with them when I go away, for they have often amused me when I was very miserable. I wonder if you would ask Glinda." "No, it wouldn't do at all," declared Dorothy positively. "There wouldn't be room in your hole in the ground for so many rabbits, especially when you get the lily chair and your clothes there. Don't think of such a thing, your Majesty." The king sighed. Then he stood up and announced to the company, "We will now behold a military drill by my picked bodyguard of royal pikemen." Now the band played a march, and a company of rabbit soldiers came in. They wore green and gold uniforms and marched very stiffly, but in perfect time. Their spears, or pikes, had slender shafts of polished silver with golden heads, and during the drill they handled these weapons with wonderful dexterity. "I should think you'd feel pretty safe with such a fine bodyguard," remarked Dorothy. "I do," said the king. "They protect me from every harm. I suppose Glinda wouldn't—" "No," interrupted the girl. "I'm sure she wouldn't. It's a king's own bodyguard, and when you are no longer king, you can't have 'em." The king did not reply, but he looked rather sorrowful for a time. When the soldiers had marched out, he said to the company, "The royal jugglers will now appear." Dorothy had seen many jugglers in her lifetime, but never any so interesting as these. There were 6 of them, dressed in black satin embroidered with queer symbols in silver, a costume which contrasted strongly with their snow-white fur. First they pushed in a big red ball, and 3 of the rabbit jugglers stood upon its top and made it roll. Then 2 of them caught up a third and tossed him into the air, all vanishing until one of the 2 were left. Then one of these tossed the other upward and remained alone of all his fellows. This last juggler now touched the red ball, which fell apart, being hollow, and the 5 rabbits who had disappeared in the air scrambled out of the hollow ball. Next they all clung together and rolled swiftly upon the floor. When they came to a stop, only one fat rabbit juggler was seen, the others seeming to be inside him. This one leaped lightly into the air, and when he came down, he exploded and separated into the original 6. Then 4 of them rolled themselves into round balls, and the other 2 tossed them around and played ball with them. These were but a few of the tricks the rabbit jugglers performed, and they were so skillful that all the nobility and even the king applauded as loudly as did Dorothy. "I suppose there are no rabbit jugglers in all the world to compare with these," remarked the king. "And since I may not have the whiskered friskers or my bodyguard, you might ask Glinda to let me take away just 2 or 3 of these jugglers, will you?" "I'll ask her," replied Dorothy doubtfully. "Thank you," said the king. "Thank you very much. And now you shall listen to the winsome, waggish warblers, who have often cheered me in my moments of anguish." The winsome, waggish warblers proved to be a quartet of rabbit singers, 2 gentlemen and 2 lady rabbits. The gentlemen warblers wore full-dress, swallow-tailed suits with white satin, with pearls for buttons, while the lady warblers were gowned in white satin dresses with long trails. The first song they sang began in this way: "When a rabbit gets a habit of living in a city and wearing clothes and furbelows and jewels rare and pretty, he scorns the bun who has to run and burrow in the ground, and pity those whose watchful foes are man and gun and hound." Dorothy looked at the king when she heard this song and noticed that he seemed disturbed and ill at ease. "I don't like that song," he said to the warblers. "Give us something jolly and rollicking." So they sang to a joyous tinkling melody as follows: "Bunnies gay delight to play in their fairy town secure. Every frisker flirts his whisker at a pink-eyed girl demure. Every maid in silk arrayed at her partner shyly glances. Paws are grasps, waists are clasps, and they whirl in giddy dances. Then together through the heather, 'neath the moonlight soft they stroll. Each is very blithe and merry, gambolling with laughter droll. Life is fun to everyone. Guarded by our magic charm, for to dangers we are strangers, safe from any thought of harm." "You see," said Dorothy to the king, "when the song ended, the rabbits all seemed to like Bunnybury except you. And I guess you're the only one that ever has cried or was unhappy and wanted to get back to your muddy hole in the ground." His Majesty seemed thoughtful, and while the servants passed around glasses of nectar and plates of frosted cakes, their king was silent and a bit nervous. When the refreshments had been enjoyed by all and the servants had retired, Dorothy said, "I must go now, for it's getting late and I'm lost. I've got to find the wizard and Aunt Em and Uncle Henry and all the rest some time before night comes, if I possibly can." "Won't you stay with us?" asked the king. "You will be very welcome." "No, thank you," she replied. "I must get back to my friends, and I want to see Glinda just as soon as I can, you know." So the king dismissed his court and said he would himself walk with Dorothy to the gate. He did not weep nor groan any more, but his long face was quite solemn and his big ears hung dejectedly on each side of it. He still wore his crown and his ermine and walked with the handsome gold-headed cane. When they arrived at the room in the wall, the little girl found Toto and Billina waiting for her very patiently. They had been liberally fed by some of the attendants and were in no hurry to leave such comfortable quarters. The keeper of the wicket was by this time back in his old place, but he kept a safe distance from Toto. Dorothy bade Well, battery life seems to be getting shorter and shorter with these dang things. I guess pretty soon I'll just have to leave it plugged the heck in like... Anyway, the keeper of the wicket was by this time back in his old place, but he kept a safe distance from Toto. Dorothy bade goodbye to the king as they stood just inside the wall. "You've been good to me," she said, "and I thank you ever so much. As soon as possible, I'll see Glinda and ask her to put another king in your place and send you back into the wild forest. And I'll ask her to let you keep some of your clothes and the little lily chair and one or two jugglers to amuse you. I'm sure she will do it, because she's so kind she doesn't like anyone to be unhappy." said the king, looking rather downcast. "I don't like to trouble you with my misery, so you needn't see Glinda." "Oh, yes, I will," she replied. "It won't be any trouble at all. But, my dear," continued the king in an embarrassed way, "I've been thinking the subject over carefully, and I find that there are a lot of pleasant things here in Bunnybury that I would miss if I went away. So perhaps I better stay." Dorothy laughed. Then she looked grave. "It won't do for you to be a king and a crybaby at the same time," she said. "You've been making all the other rabbits unhappy and discontented with your howls about being so miserable. so I guess it's better to have another king." "Oh, no, indeed," exclaimed the king earnestly. "If you won't say anything to Glinda, I'll promise to be merry and gay all the time, and never cry or wail again." "Honor bright?" she asked. "On the royal word of a king, I promise it," he answered. "All right," said Dorothy. "You'd be a regular lunatic to want to leave Bunnybury for a wild life in the forest, and I'm sure any rabbit outside the city would be glad to take your place." "Forget it, my dear. Forget all my foolishness," pleaded the king earnestly. "Hereafter I'll try to enjoy myself and do my duty by my subjects." So then she left him and entered through the little door into the room in the wall, where she grew gradually bigger and bigger until she had resumed her natural size. The keeper of the wicket let them out into the forest and told Dorothy that she had been of great service to Bunnybury because she had brought their dismal king to a realization of the pleasure of ruling so beautiful a city. "I shall start a petition to have your statue erected beside Glinda's in the public square," said the keeper. "I hope you will come again some day and see it." "Perhaps I shall," she replied. Then, followed by Toto and Billina, she walked away from the high marble wall and started back along the narrow path toward the signpost. And there you go. The king changed his mind. You silly king. Why would you want... Yeah. Don't know what you've got till it's gone. He was wise not to let it go. Chapter 22. How the Wizard Found Dorothy. When they came to the signpost, there, to their joy, were the tents of the wizard pitched beside the path and the kettle bubbling merrily over a fire. The Shaggy Man and Omby Amby were gathering firewood, while Uncle Henry and Aunt Em sat in their camp chairs talking with the wizard. They all ran forward to greet Dorothy as she approached, and Aunt Em exclaimed, "Goodness gracious, child, where have you been?" "You've played hooky the whole day," added the Shaggy Man reproachfully. "Well, you see, I've been lost," explained the little girl, "and I've tried awful hard to find the way back to you, but just couldn't do it." "Did you wander in the forest all day?" asked Uncle Henry. There they are at the sign with the camp behind it. Yay! "You must be most starved," said Aunt Em. "No," said Dorothy, "I'm not hungry. I had a wheelbarrow and a piano for breakfast, and lunched with the king." "Ah!" exclaimed the wizard, nodding with a bright smile. "So you've been having adventures again." "She's stark crazy," cried Aunt Em. "Who ever heard of eating a wheelbarrow?" "It wasn't very big," said Dorothy, "and it had a zuzu wheel." "And I ate the crumbs," added Billina soberly. "Sit down and tell us about it," begged the wizard. "We've hunted for you all day, and at last I noticed your footsteps in this path, and the tracks of Billina. We found the path by accident, and seeing it only led to two places, I decided you were at either one or the other of those places. So we made camp and waited for you to return. And now, Dorothy, tell us where you have been, to Bunbury or to Bunnybury?" "Why, I've been to both," she replied. "But first I went to Utensia, which isn't on any path at all." Then she sat down and related the day's adventures, and you may be sure Aunt Em and Uncle Henry were much astonished at the story. "But after seeing the cut-and-clips and the Fuddles," remarked her uncle, "we ought not to wonder at anything in this strange country." "Seems like the only common and ordinary folks here are ourselves," rejoined Aunt Em definitely. "Now that we're together again and one reunited party," observed the Shaggy Man, "what are we to do next?" "Have some supper and a night's rest," answered the wizard promptly, "and then proceed upon our journey." "Where to?" asked the Captain General. "We haven't visited the rigmaroles or the flutterbud budgets yet," said Dorothy. "I'd like to see them, wouldn't you?" Pardon the cough. "They don't sound very interesting," objected Aunt Em, "but perhaps they are." "And then," continued the little wizard, "we will call upon the Tin Woodman and Jack Pumpkinhead and our old friend the Scarecrow on our way home." "That will be nice," cried Dorothy eagerly. "Can't say they sound very interesting either," remarked Aunt Em. "Why, they're the best friends I have," asserted the little girl, "and you're sure to like them, Aunt Em, 'cause everybody likes them." By this time twilight was approaching, so they ate at the fine supper with which the wizard magically produced from the kettle, and then went to bed in the cozy tents. They were all up bright and early next morning, but Dorothy didn't venture to wander from the camp again for fear of more accidents or adventures. "Do you know where there's a road?" she asked the little man. "No, my dear," replied the wizard, "but I'll find one." After breakfast he waved his hand toward the tents, and they became handkerchiefs again, which were at once returned to the pockets of their owners. Then they all climbed into the red wagon, and the Sawhorse inquired, "Which way?" "Never mind which way," replied the wizard. "Just go as you please, and you're sure to be right. I've enchanted the wheels of the wagon, and they will roll in the right direction, never fear." As the Sawhorse started away through the trees, Dorothy said, "If we had one of those new-fashioned airships, we could float away over the top of the forest and look down and find just the places we want." "Airship? Pah! Pah!" retorted the little man scornfully. "I hate those things, Dorothy, although they are nothing new to either you or me. I was a balloonist for many years, and once my balloon carried me to the land of Oz, and once to the Vegetable Kingdom. And once Ozma had a gump that flew all over this kingdom and had sense enough to go where it was told, which airships won't do. The house which the cyclone brought to Oz all the way from Kansas, with you and Toto in it, was a real airship at the time. So you see, we've had plenty of experiences flying with the birds." "Airships are not so bad after all," declared Dorothy. "Some day they'll fly all over the world, and perhaps bring people even to the land of Oz." "I must speak to Ozma about that," said the wizard, with a slight frown. "It wouldn't do at all, you know, for the Emerald City to become a way station on an airship line." "No," said Dorothy, "I don't suppose it would. But what can we do to prevent it?" "I'm working out a magic recipe to fuddle men's brains, so they'll never make an airship that will go where they want it to go," the wizard confided to her. "That won't keep the things from flying now and then, but it'll keep them from flying to the land of Oz." Just then the Sawhorse drew the wagon out of the forest, and a beautiful landscape lay spread before the travelers' eyes. Moreover, right before them was a good road that wound away through the hills and valleys. "Now," said the wizard with evident delight, "we are on the right track again, and there is nothing more to worry about." "It's a foolish thing to take chances in a strange country," observed the Shaggy Man. "Had we kept to the roads, we never would have been lost. Roads always lead to some place, else they wouldn't be roads." This road, added the wizard, leads to Rigmarole Town. I'm sure of that because I enchanted the wagon wheels. There they are. Sure enough, after riding along the road for an hour or two, they entered a pretty valley where a village was nestled among the hills. The houses were munchkin-shaped, for they were all domes, with windows wider than they were high, and pretty balconies over the front doors. Aunt Em was greatly relieved to find this town neither paper nor patchwork, and the only surprising thing about it was that it was so far distant from all the other towns. As the sawhorse drew the wagon into the main street, the travelers noticed that the place was filled with people, standing in groups and seeming to be engaged in earnest conversation. So occupied with themselves were the inhabitants that they scarcely noticed the strangers at all. So the wizard stopped a boy and asked, "Is this Rigmarole Town?" "Sir," replied the boy, "if you have traveled very much, you will have noticed that every town differs from every other town in one way or another, and so by observing the methods of the people and the way they live as well as the style of their dwelling places, it not to be a difficult thing to make up your mind without the trouble of asking questions whether the town bears the appearance of the one you intended to visit, or whether perhaps having taken a different road from the one you should have taken, you have made an error in your way and arrived at some point where—" "Land sakes!" cried Aunt Em impatiently. "What's all this rigmarole about?" "That's it," said the wizard, laughing merrily. "It's a rigmarole because the boy is a rigmarole, and we've come to Rigmarole Town." "Do they all talk like that?" asked Dorothy, wonderingly. "He might have said yes or no and settled the question," observed Uncle Henry. "Not here," said Omby Amby. "I don't believe the rigmaroles know what yes or no means." While the boy had been talking, several other people had approached the wagon and listened intently to his speech. Then they began talking to one another in long, deliberate speeches, where many words were used but little was said. And when the strangers criticized them so frankly, one of the women, who had no one else to talk to, began an address to them, saying, "It is the easiest thing in the world for a person to say yes or no when a question that is asked for the purpose of gaining information or satisfying the curiosity of the one who has given expression to the inquiry has attracted the attention of an individual who may be competent either from personal experience or the experience of others to answer it with more or less correctness, or at least an attempt to satisfy the desire for information on the part of the one who has made the inquiry by—" "Dear me!" exclaimed Dorothy, interrupting the speech. "I've lost all track of what you are saying." "Don't let her begin again, for goodness sake!" cried Aunt Em. But the woman did not begin again. She did not even stop talking, but went right on as she had begun, the words flowing from her mouth in a stream. "I'm quite sure that if we waited long enough and listened carefully, some of these people might be able to tell us something in time," said the wizard. "Don't let's wait," returned Dorothy. "I've heard of the rigmaroles and wondered what they were like, but now I know, and I'm ready to move on." "So am I," declared Uncle Henry. "We're wasting time here." "Why, we're all ready to go," added the Shaggy Man, putting his fingers to his ears to shut out the monotonous babble of those around the wagon. So the wizard spoke to the sawhorse, who trotted nimbly through the village and soon gained the open country on the other side of it. Dorothy looked back as they rode away and noticed that the woman had not yet finished her speech, but was talking as glibly as ever, although no one was near to hear her. If those people wrote books, Ambi remarked with a smile, it would take a whole library to say the cow jumped over the moon. That's a lot of rigmarole. Perhaps some of them do write books, asserted the little wizard. I've read a few rigmaroles that might have come from this very town. Some of the college lecturers and ministers are certainly related to these people, observed the Shaggy Man. And it seems to me the land of Oz is a little ahead of the United States in some of its laws. For here, if one can't talk clearly and straight to the point, they send him to Rigmarole Town, while Uncle Sam lets him roam around wild and free to torture innocent people. Ain't it the truth? And most of them get elected politicians. Dorothy was thoughtful. The rigmaroles had made a strong impression upon her. She decided that whenever she spoke after this, she would use only enough words to express what she wanted to say. And off they go. And next is how they encountered the Flutterbudgets. That'll be chapter 23. Moving right along. Dee-da-dee-da-dee. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Cock-a-doodle. Quack, quack. Yeah, our neighbors used to have, neighbors we used to have had chickens and ducks. It was funny. They'd wake up in the morning and cock-a-doodle, whack, whack. Their eggs were delicious, though. Now our one of our boarders, Maggie, she gets fresh eggs. Oh God, they're delicious. They're good. It's wonderful. Thank you, Maggie. I think she sometimes watches these. I don't know, but or listens. Does anybody really watch? I don't know. These aren't really watchy things. Just put them on and listen until you fall asleep. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, speaking of falling asleep, I'm going to go take a shower and get some laundry going. Maybe I can get a load or two done tonight while the wife is away at, this is her Friday. She works 3 nights a week. 12.5-hour shifts. Or 12-hour shifts. Half-hour lunch. So, anyway, I like to get things done like these videos when she's not here. That way, when she's here, I'd spend time with her because it's my favorite thing to do. I finally found my person, and she has said that she has found hers, and life is wonderful. So, while I go shower and get laundry going, you have sweet dreams. Ow, wrong button, bonehead. Oh. Not seeing stars. When I close my eyes, there's a ring of white lights. Woo! Sweet dreams, everybody.